This episode of the Western Outdoor News Podcast is brought to you by Bishop RV Park and Campground. Located just 2 blocks off Main Street in Bishop, California, the heart of the Eastern Sierra, Bishop RV Park is walking distance to downtown dining and shops and offers 42 spaces with full hookups, over 135 spaces with partial hookups, along with group camping and pull-through sites for larger rigs. They really have it all. If you're planning your trip to the Eastern Sierra, check out Bishop RV Park, linked in today's show notes.
Found my dad's truck, literally followed footprints in the snow to find where they were. Sure enough, I walk up on them and they're just one big trout after another.
Long ago, I discovered it's the Sierra that attracts me most, and it's the fish that are second.
You know it's that time of year again. It's the Eastern Sierra opener, the last weekend in April. The last episode, we spoke with Jeff from Mono County Tourism. He gave us the 411 on the new openings, conditions, the regulations, everything. This episode, we're having an Eastern Sierra roundtable. We brought on Western Outdoor News editor Mike Stevens and Eastern Sierra reporting legend Ernie Cowan. We talk all things Eastern Sierra, and we get some interesting tips on how to keep people out of your spots straight from Ernie.
As my son started to walk over there, I saw a bear walking along that shore. And I yelled to him, "Be careful, Rich, there's a bear coming along the shore." And I looked over, and those 2 women packed up in lightning speed and were gone.
Well, that's one way to clear the shoreline, but if you're heading up for opening weekend and planning on fishing the Eastern Sierra this season, you're going to love this episode. But for the full rundown of everything Eastern Sierra, check out the April 16th issue of Western Outdoor News. It's shipping out now, or it's available online at wonews.com. So let's get to it, the Eastern Sierra Roundtable with Ernie Cowan and Mike Stevens.
I've been covering the Eastern Sierra for Western Outdoor News for a number of years now, and this year would be my 41st opener if it hadn't been for COVID, which I lost one, and then another event that I lost 1 year. So 39 years I've been covering openers, and then not to mention then 5 or 6 trips a year up to fish. So the Eastern Sierra is a beautiful place that I love, and the fishing there is like no place else really in the world in terms of variety and different opportunities that are available for anglers. So happy to be here today to help share that knowledge with your listeners.
Excellent. Mike Stevens, if you guys know the name, you've heard him on the podcast before. Mike, tell us about yourself and your experience in the Sierras.
Yeah, Western Outdoor News editor. I've been covering the opener for the last 7 or 8 years for Western Outdoor News, but I've been fishing the Eastern Sierra for, I think, over 30 years now. And I'm excited to get back up there for this year's opener. Like Ernie said, we missed last year's, and it was rough not having a real opener, even though the season eventually ended. But we didn't have that holiday atmosphere that opening day is.
So I know a lot of people listening to this, they might be experienced with the Sierras, but we're gonna just at the beginning here, we're gonna take a step back and talk about what is the opener, what's actually opening, who shows up to this, why are people so amped up for opening day?
It's if you haven't done it, the parallel would probably be opening day of baseball season, or opening day of anything that you enjoy, NASCAR season, anything that is exciting to you. For those that have gone once or more times, it is something that you look forward to because number one, the overpowering beauty of the Eastern Sierra, and then you combine that with the opportunity of tangling with some huge fish. And I think anglers by nature are optimistic, and so they all think they're going to go out on opening day and catch the trophy rainbow or the monster brown, which is possible. And that's what keeps us coming back. That and then the fellowship. Most people that go up for opening weekend tend to go with the same people year after year, and it's a tradition that builds. And I think that's one of the things I'm most impressed with over the years of covering the openers is how many groups you run into that are the same people you saw the year before and the year before that include oftentimes great-grandfathers, grandfathers, fathers, kids, son-in-laws, and grandkids. And it's a family tradition. And a lot of people will go up with memorials to honor those that went for years in the past but can't make it this year because they've passed on. So it's a very special event, and known in the fishing world as Fishmas in the Eastern Sierra, because it's got just about the same level of excitement as Christmas does to a lot of trout anglers.
I can actually speak on that point Ernie made about the multi-generation groups that go up there. Specifically, one of the first spots when I'm covering the opener I go to is Lake Crowley, and I'll walk down there and I'll walk the cove behind the boat docks. And almost every year I've covered it, the entire cove is not only the same family, and we're talking like 25, 30 people, and they tell me 4 generations of people are here. They're all from Whittier. It's like this is the baseball coach from the high school, and this is grandpa and dad and all the kids, and it's legitimately 4 generations in one cove, and they're there every year. Like, I run into the same guys in the same spots on these lakes when I'm up there doing this. And some of them, they get T-shirts made, custom T-shirts made, opener 2021 or whenever it is, so they can identify with their group. But there's no other, and I go to the Sierra all year, the entire season. There's no other time of year where you see groups like that concentrated in one area.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like those families at Disneyland that all show up with the
Exactly.
with the same T-shirt on, and they're going for their big trip just to get the season started.
And you can say that same thing about June Lake, Grant Lake, Sabrina. There's people up there every year hoping to be able to auger through the ice and do some ice fishing. And some years you can, and some years you can't. South Lake, you name it. So it is a very distinctive pattern.
Have you ever done ice fishing?
Oh, yeah.
in the Sierra.
And Mike will tell you that in the years that we've been doing this, you'll see it all, from years when it's just about solid ice and even maybe an aggressive storm the night before, to bluebird weather where you're in shirt sleeves as soon as the sun comes up. But some of the years have been lots of ice that are still on the higher elevation lakes, and there's always somebody usually up there with a motor auger that'll go around and punch a bunch of holes in the ice for you. And I'll tell you, that is really exciting to drop a lure or bait down through a 6-inch hole or an 8-inch hole, and it's kind of like a grab bag, and you just wait for that line to twitch, and you pull it up, and you've got a fish that keeps coming out of that ice, and it's like, oh my heavens, 3 or 4 pound trout will be really epic to pull out of the ice.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never tried it. You always see it, you always hear about it, but actually you never think about going up there and ice fishing.
And a little caution: you're going to wear a hat when you're ice fishing to protect you, but it doesn't protect you from the sun reflecting off the ice. And you will burn like a French fry if you do not wear sunscreen when ice fishing.
A reverse sunburn.
Even with a wide brim hat. So
yeah, it's like going skiing or snowboarding. You got to put your sunscreen on,
Yep.
even though it's freezing cold out there.
Yep.
All right, so what's actually opening up? What areas can we look forward to? What spots are you looking forward to, Mike?
Well, as far as what opens up, it's most of the easy to get to, I call them drive-up lakes between Bishop and Bridgeport. Starting from the bottom up, you got Rock Creek Lake if it's accessible. Crowley and Convict Lakes will always be open on opening day. Mammoth Lakes Basin is usually not open unless you're really lucky, and I'll touch on that later. There's the June Lake Loop. Almost all those lakes are accessible by opening day, and further up the road all the way up to the big lakes in Bridgeport, Twin Lakes and Bridgeport Reservoir are usually open. And from then it's just a matter of like talking to people and seeing if any of the fringe lakes in the close back country might be open. You can hike to in the snow and fish. It's just a matter of the conditions and what kind of winter they had leading up to the last Saturday of April.
And then let's take the Bishop Creek Basin, too, which is the closest drive to variety fishing destination from Southern California. And right now, for instance, you're going to find most of the waters there are flowing well in the various forks of Bishop Creek. South Lake will still be frozen, but it's breaking up and will likely be open by opening day. Sabrina is got ice on it, but also maybe breaking up. North Lake will probably still be solid. But my point is you've got this variety. For those that really want to ice fish, they could probably go to North Lake at the very worst. And you're going to have creek fishing, and you're going to have open waters completely, like Intake 2, and certainly by the dam at South Lake. So it's the variety that places like that and some of the other places that Mike mentioned is what's most attractive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I grew up going to Lee Vining, and like you guys said earlier, just finding water and saying, hey, what's in there? What are some of your guys' stories of hiking back and finding some hidden gems in the Sierras?
Well, we're not going to tell you those.
You don't have to tell me coordinates, just in general.
Well, one of the things that I most enjoy is a fly rod, a small box of flies, and heading out on a trail. Long ago, I discovered it's the Sierra that attracts me most, and it's the fish that are second. And I remember many trips where I've, let's say, taken a boat to the back of South Lake, and then I just hike up one of the inlet creeks with a fly rod and a single fly, just casting into the pools or dipping the little pools. And in a day of hiking, I recall my best day was 105 fish that I caught and released. I caught 105 fish. I came back with one, so I guess technically I caught and released 104. The one was about a 2.5-pound trout that we were going to use for dinner. So that to me is most enjoyable. Other people really enjoy the boat experience because it's more comfortable, it's relaxed. You're just sitting there and drifting around fishing. Other people are bored by that. They want more activity. So that's the point about, I think, the variety of the Eastern Sierra throughout the season, which makes it so attractive, and as well as opening day.
Right. There's a little something for everyone. As far as I'm kind of on the same page as Ernie in that a lot of my favorite spots, a lot of them won't be open on opening day, but a lot of them are off. All these lakes have a creek running into them, then running out of them. And, you don't have to hike that far to get away from people. If you want to be away from people, it's not that hard. Like you can get to a lake when everything's open. You can get to a lake that takes 20 minutes for you to walk to that won't have anyone else on it all day. I don't fish much on the opener. I do fish a little bit, but it's usually I'll hop out of the truck and, like Ernie said, I'll hit Mammoth Creek or Convict Creek or, maybe just any creek going into any lake. You can find yourself away from the opening day herd if that's what you're looking to do.
Well, that's true. The drive-to lakes, as Mike mentioned, are going to be the ones that are going to be the hardest hit because there are some people who legitimately can't walk very far. Perhaps they've got physical limitations, and so they want to be able to get to a lake where they can deploy a comfortable chair and have their tackle box and all the equipment that they need, and in a picnic basket, and sit there and enjoy the day fishing. I had a funny story one time. My son and I went up to fish Twin Lakes in Mammoth, and if you're familiar with that, there's a little bridge that crosses between the two lakes over onto the other side. And the spot that we traditionally fished there is on the other side of that bridge, and there were a couple of women sitting over there at our spot. And I was like, oh, darn. And as my son started to walk over there, I saw a bear walking along that shore. And I yelled to him in all innocence, but just say, hey, be careful, Rich, there's a bear coming along the shore. And I looked over, and those two women packed up in lightning speed and were gone. And I thought, well, that's a great technique.
I knew where that was going.
Yeah,
it's a good way to get your spot.
The old bear in my spot.
The old bear in my spot. Yeah.
How about you, Mike? I'm sure you've been covering the event for so long. I'm sure that you have some good stories.
I do. I have a bit of a story with a lesson at the end. I mentioned how I cover Convict and Crowley. And anyone who's been to Convict Lake who's tried to do anything on their cell phone quickly realizes it's a cellular black hole up there. Like you can't even text from Crowley Lake. So, from Convict. I'm at Crowley in the morning. I go over to Convict and I do a lap at Convict and I have lunch there. And I have to be back at Crowley by, I think, 3 o'clock because Bart Hall gives some awards out at Crowley Lake for people who caught big fish. So I wanted to be down there for that. So I'm coming out of Convict, and when I get out of the mountains, approaching 395, my phone starts blowing up with text messages. And I'm looking at it, and it's my brother, and he's up at Lake Mamie with my dad. And he's like, every cast with a Thomas Buoyant is a 2 to 5 pound trout at Lake Mary. He's like, get up here. Well, I've got to be at Crowley in 45 minutes. So I get down there where I got to go right to Crowley or left to the Mammoth Lakes Basin.
Literally at a fork in the road.
Right. So sure enough, I jerked it left and flew up through Mammoth, got up to Lake Mamie, found my dad's truck, literally followed footprints in the snow to find where they were. Sure enough, I walk up on them, and they're just one big trout after another. And I've probably fished for 15 minutes, and I caught 5 or 6 of them, and then I had to go. And I shot back down to Crowley, and I made it in time. But my point is, I mentioned earlier how you're lucky if the Mammoth Lakes Basin is open on opening day. And it's rare. I think it's only happened twice since I started covering it. Because Ernie mentioned how all these trout opener veterans, they're so locked into their spots. Most of those spots are the places that are always open. So if Mammoth Lakes Basin is open, that's nobody's spot. So nobody's up there, but it's fully stocked for the opener. So that day at Mamie, no one else was on the lake that day. Mm-hmm. And I drove around the loop, and I didn't see many people anywhere. Or if I did see them, they weren't fishing. And then I remembered it a couple years before that, Pat McDonald, the former editor here, he was up at Lake Mary on a pontoon with Don Barrett and just slayed trout all by himself. So the point is, pay attention to the weather and the conditions up there. And if the Mammoth Lakes Basin is open, at least carve out some time to check it out.
And my prediction is this year that it will not be open for a couple of reasons. One, as Mike said, traditionally it isn't. But the reason that it isn't is because sometimes it's not the fact that there's snow. Frequently there isn't any snow. But the Forest Service, who manages that area, has contracts, and then especially with COVID, I suspect it will not be open this year, no matter what the conditions are for opening day. Which means that the few anglers that'll be there will park at Twin Lakes and hike in. Twin Lakes will probably see pretty good pressure because you'll be able to drive there. But then what Mike says is absolutely true. That's the best kept secret that we won't share with anybody. But if you can get into Mammoth Lakes Basin, it's a great place to be on opening weekend.
Yeah, it's hidden.
Did I say that?
Yeah, hidden in plain sight on opening weekend. Like you go up there in July and there's people everywhere.
Yeah, and bears.
But you go up there for the opener when everybody's surrounding Convict and Crowley and the June Lakes Loop and so on. It can be a real gem. It's worth checking out if you can get to it.
Yeah. So I guess the lesson being, don't stick to your one spot. Sure, you might have family tradition. You might say, this is the spot we meet at every year, but you can make those new memories if you might branch out to some of those newly opened areas that you might not be familiar with.
Well, that's a very good point. I would say the vast majority of the people that go up for the opener are traditional, in the sense that this is where they've gone every year, and that's what they're going to do again.
Totally get it.
It's the guys that do that are the nomads, if you will, that may do better, because these are the cannonball guys that'll come up, they'll hit Convict for a couple hours, then they'll go up and they might even start in the Bishop Creek Basin, then they'll come up to Convict, and they'll maybe hit a couple of the Mammoth Waters and hit the Loop. And maybe even run up to Virginia Lakes, which is a pretty good chance they'll be ice fishing up there. Mm-hmm. They'll be blank some places, and other places they'll score big. But yeah, they're not looking for tradition as much as bragging rights.
Yeah, and I get it with the tradition, because another thing I found is a lot of these opening day anglers, they come up on Friday and they're a lot of times going home on Sunday.
Yep.
So you don't have a lot of time to freelance around in that situation, especially if that's your family spot. Like, this is what we do. Mm-hmm. So if there's a way to extend the trip a little bit and look elsewhere, it's a good idea. Or even if you could even stay until Monday, most of the crowd's gone by then.
Yeah, right.
And there's a little bit more wiggle room for you to look around. But also on opening day, what you see is almost like a picnic environment. You see easy ups and it's not as easy
barbecues.
And barbecues and Bluetooth speakers sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy to just pick up shop, and move even to a lake nearby.
And I think another dynamic, I think we discussed this in the pre-show, but the other dynamic this year is there's some new regulations. In fact, anglers going up to the Sierra this year for the opener really need to make sure they understand the new regulations. For the most part, the waters that what they're calling the resort lakes will be open traditionally. But there are some waters that are not going to be open. Rush Creek, for instance, which is a very popular stretch of water between Silver Lake and Grant Lake, will be closed. It will not open until the Saturday before Memorial Day this year. And so anybody that ventures out there not thinking, and that's because that's the way we've always done it, I'll guarantee it, they're going to meet a warden, and it won't be pleasant. On the positive side, there's going to be some waters that haven't been open before. In the Bishop Creek Basin, it'll be Intake 2 and North Lake are going to be open year-round now, and they're open now. They opened on March 1st. Those will be stocked, or at least Intake 2 will. Mm-hmm. And for those that want to hike it's about a mile, and it's a rough mile into North Lake. There's going to be some winter fishing there. Probably will be ice fishing. So there'll be opportunities available if they want to come up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before the opener, settle in, adjust to the altitude,
right.
Dust their gear off, get it going. They could have a great time and then settle into their traditional spots on opening day. So it's going to be an interesting year from that standpoint.
Yeah, Ernie mentioned it, but just to reiterate, it's going to be really important to check the regulations on the body of water you're in, because I went through the regulations. It's overwhelming when you look at it all at once, but it's alphabeticalized. I'm talking about on the Department of Fish and Wildlife website. You can find it. But if you just look alphabetically for the waters you're going to fish, you can figure out what you can and can't do. And it's tricky in some places. Like I've noticed Convict Creek, you can fish Convict Creek kind of from like where it comes out of Convict Lake and runs through the campground will be open. But below 395, like by the Green Church, like that stretch of it, running into towards Crowley won't be open. So it's not just a matter of whether or not this is a new body of water that's open or not with the new regs. There could be regs within the new regs
right.
to take into consideration. And Ernie mentioned Rush Creek. I think the same thing applies to any tributary of Crowley because they're protecting spawning browns.
Right.
They didn't want to open that up to year round because browns aren't stocked, and they wanted to give them a break.
So you guys are throwing around a lot of these terms that somebody who has never heard of going up to the opener, they may not understand. So let me just paint a picture, and you guys tell me where this person should go. Let's say that you're trying to bring your son or daughter to the Sierras for the first time ever. You don't know the difference between convict or a loop, an intake. You don't know the difference between any of those things. You just want to go up and show your son or daughter this beautiful land and show them a good time catching these fish. Where do you go? What should I type into Google Maps to bring me?
Well, the first thing they ought to do is subscribe to Western Outdoor News and get the season preview, which will be coming out real soon.
Yeah.
That'll have a lot of information in there. But there's a number of sites. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce in Bishop has maps and so forth of their open fishing waters, and so there's a lot of information available. And then I would say, what kind of fishing do you want to do? Are you young and vigorous and want to run all over the high country, or are you want to go and just put your chair down someplace and enjoy a quiet time at the side of a lake? So those are kind of the alternatives. Can you get a boat? Do you have a boat? Are you going to rent a boat? Are boats available? All of those questions you need to answer, and then perhaps call around and see if rentals are available. A lot of the rentals are going to already be like June Lake.
Right.
They're sold out. I can bet you those boats are already spoken
reserved,
for.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if it's a first timer in a family situation with maybe little kids, any of those resort type lakes that we've been talking about, the drive up lakes, places where you can park and find a spot along the bank to hang out and dunk power bait. And from what I've seen, it's not the worst way to get after it fishing wise on opening day. It's the water's still super cold. You're not going to have real aggressive fish, chasing down, lures you're checking necessarily. And I see guys a lot of times, the quickest limits come from those people who are setting up shop along the shoreline and throwing worms or floating power bait and hanging out.
Yeah, doing the old faithful.
Yeah.
And Mike makes a really good point. And that can change from minute to minute. I remember one year, and it was an ice fishing year, at Sabrina, Lake Sabrina, which is in Bishop Creek Basin. We went up on opening morning, which was Saturday, and I was using, if I recall, was dunking power bait through the hole. Didn't catch a thing. And finally I started asking around, and everybody was catching everything on worms. So that afternoon came back with worms and caught a lot of fish. Next day came up with my worms, didn't catch a thing. I started asking around, everybody was catching it on power bait. So it's I wish I understood why, but right. Go prepared, I guess is what I'm saying, with a couple of bait choices, and then don't be afraid to ask your neighbors. Their fishermen are an incredibly helpful group of people. I mean, there are some weird people out there. When you ask them, where did you catch that? They'll say in the water, or did you ask, what did you use? And they'll go bait. But most fishermen want to see other people catch fish, and
especially
they're happy
trout
to share,
fishermen.
Yeah, what they're using.
Yeah. So obviously everything can change day to day in the water, but also with the weather. So what should people keep an eye out for with the variable weather conditions?
Take everything you own, because there could be avalanches. And no, you laugh, but there can. But Mike, I said it earlier. We both experienced driving snowstorms the night before or the day of, and then later in the day you're in shirt sleeves. Mike hasn't seen rain. I have seen horrendous. What's the word I was looking for?
Hellacious.
Yeah, hellacious and horrendous. Yeah,
biblical
rainstorms. And so you gotta go prepared. The Sierra. The old joke up there, if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes, it'll change. And it can change dramatically. So you need to go prepared for the weather. I've seen people up there in T-shirts that didn't have heavy equipment, heavy jackets with them or rain gear, and were miserable. I was one time fishing back in the 20 Lakes Basin and ran into a family back there as a summer storm came through, and temperatures dropped from 70 degrees to 30 degrees in about 10 minutes. They were in shorts and T-shirts. And literally were going hypothermic when I got to them. I had an emergency blanket. I wrapped them up, got them to the boat docks, and got them out of there. But it's an unforgiving place, that high country is, and so you got to be prepared.
I've seen it where, I mentioned how I bounce back and forth between Convict and Crowley. One year I remember being down on Crowley, and it was the year that it snowed a lot the night before, but the day of was pretty clear. But the wind started blowing on Crowley, and it was miserable down there. Well, I go up to Convict, and where it's normally windy in that crater, and it's Bluebird, and everyone's in T-shirts. So when I went back to Crowley, I'm telling guys, I'm like, why don't you guys just go up to Convict and relax? And they're just, this is our spot, this is what we do.
Yeah.
So
and let me throw something in here. We touched on the wind. The wind can be unforgiving up there, and there was a tragedy a couple of years ago at June Lake when too many guys went out on a boat and it swamped in the wind, and sadly there were some lives lost. I can't stress enough. I think I said it a minute ago. The weather can be unforgiving up there, and the mistakes can be unforgiving. So don't let the enthusiasm and the excitement of the season allow you to make bad choices. Always err on the side of safety, because it's not downtown. You're out in the woods, and if something happens, it can be serious.
Yeah, there's somebody. Last time I was up there for the opener, somebody fell in the water in Crowley. They ended up fishing them out, but it happened. But I've seen some pretty overloaded small boats on Crowley, which is one lake that they'll throw the flag up if the winds get up and get you off the water. It's serious. Crowley's not sheltered by nearby mountains. It's in a wide open caldera, and the wind can really get gnarly. And I've got some photos that I may have showed you in the past, Ernie, where you see this just
White caps.
There's white caps, and you can just see the top of the edge of the boat, and 4 guys sticking out of it. You can barely see the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, hey, on that note, what other tips and tricks can you guys give to our audience today?
Something I've noticed at Crowley, and to a lesser extent, but same deal at Convict. And this is, they keep data on all the biggest fish caught. Part of it's because of that Bart Hall prize thing they give out. I get to see page after page after page of the fish caught that day and what they ate. And it's almost entirely bait fishing from shore, if you're fishing from shore in Crowley, but also trolling, and it's not super technical trolling. It's not downriggers. It's not always lead core line. It's if you had like maybe a medium light bass rod, something that you could put 6-pound test on, guys dragging Tasmanian devils or Rapalas, they're dominating out there on opening day. I see guys throwing jigs, and I love throwing jigs, and more power to them. They're sticking to what they love to do, but I would say it's between bait and trolling on the bigger lakes on opening weekend.
And I think the other thing to remember is these trout on opening day have not seen bait or lures in several months, and they're going to be if they've iced off, which we kind of think they will because it's been a relatively mild winter. If the lakes ice off. An early ice off, a week or 2 or even a month before the season opens, these fish are going to be feeding aggressively. And so those early offerings by anglers, and that, like you said, they don't have to be sophisticated, a Panther Martin's dependable, a mice tail, and power bait. When I do the reports every week, those are the line after line after line of what people have caught them with. I get so tired of writing that, but it's it's what works. The other thing to remember,
and it's what most people are using anyway.
Exactly.
So it's a numbers game.
Yeah. But the other thing to remember is that this is going to be an interesting year. Last year, for some reason, there was this impression that there's no trout because the hatcheries that serve the Eastern Sierra were infected with disease. They had to destroy 3 million fish, and the hatcheries essentially were shut down. So for a time, actually most of the season last year, there were no state fish planted in the Eastern Sierra Lakes. Now, those are what they call catchable trout. Usually they're a pound or less. They're not very big anyway, but they're great to, what I call frying pan fish. People catch those and use them for meals. But the real trophies, the guys that people remember catching, the big ones, those were actually put in through really strong efforts by landings, county government, some fish foundations, tackle shops that raised money and actually bought large trout, what we call trophy trout, 3 to 5 pounds from Oregon, and stocked them throughout the Sierra. And that program was pretty aggressive. And already some of those programs exist, like the Bridgeport Fish Enhancement Foundation and now the Twin Lakes Fish Foundation. And in June Lake, they're creating a June Lake Fish Foundation to raise money and buy those bigger fish. You can fish all day and catch 5 catchables, the little frying pan fish. You'll never remember that other than the fact you had a good time. But when you hook into a 5-pound rainbow, you will remember that because that's a monster fish. So this year, the fact that there were fewer people last year, there was not a traditional opener last year. It was pushed back by a month because of COVID, but even then, there was no lodging or campgrounds available. Fewer fish were caught. A lot of fish were stocked. A lot of big fish were caught. And I suspect this year it could be epic on the opener because they're going to be there.
More holdovers than usual from one season to the next.
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking forward to it after missing a year. That's usually where I run into Ernie and, we trade insults and do our thing.
Well, I usually see that Vaughn's buying his trout, and that's where I know he gets his fish.
So, yeah, we'll have I say Juan has boots on the ground up there. I'll be up there in my normal spot. Ernie's going to be moving down and covering Bishop. And Rachel Von Fleck is going to be in the June Lake Loop. So we'll have full coverage of the opener, including Bridgeport. I have some contacts up there that I'm going to reach out to and see how things were up there. So we'll be there as usual.
Yeah, we'll have full coverage at wonews.com and in the paper. And, of course, our conversation here on the podcast.
And we can always urge people to, if we don't see them in the high country, and we try to get everywhere on opening weekend, but we may miss you. And if you catch that big fish, send us a picture, and include information. Where did you catch it? How big it was? And your name and hometown. And, we may use it because we love seeing anglers catch fish.
Right. And we can't be everywhere at once. So something might happen we don't see. So you can send those photos to editors at wonews.com with that information Ernie mentioned so we can write a caption, and we'll get you the paper.
Absolutely. Cool. We'll see you guys up there. Thank you so much. Well, I hope that episode got you excited for the Eastern Sierra this season. And if you are headed up there, remember to check out Bishop RV Park. The link to their website and to check out all their facilities is in the show notes today. Next week, we have a great episode for you. It's going to be a full recap of the Juan Bass California Open out of Clear Lake. We're going to have the results. We're going to talk to some of the winners. It's going to be a great episode. Check that out next week. Remember to subscribe.